Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hospital Marketing Podcast. I am your host, Patrick Bender, along with the CEO of DTC Perspectives, Scott Ehrlich. On this podcast, we will be hearing from leaders in the hospital marketing space about what makes a great campaign, how you can define success, and where hospital marketing is headed. We have some great guests on this edition of the Hospital Marketing Podcast, including Emily Renzi, the Senior Marketing Strategist at Augusta University, Bill Swanston, the Executive Creative Director at Frederick Swanston, and Christopher Lee, the Chief Commercial Officer at DMD. To start things off, Scott Ehrlich had the chance to speak with Emily Renzi at Augusta University. Over to you, Scott.
I'm here with Emily Renzi, a Senior Marketing Strategist at the Division of Communications and Marketing at Augusta University. Emily, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Scott.
Emily, how do you guys at Augusta University come up with great creative in your marketing?
Well, I would say one of the most important things that I think we do is we're very proactive and we focus a lot on our internal audiences, stakeholders. So we do a lot of great research. And of course, we do research with our patients, potential patients, but we find it's really important to do research with our internal stakeholders as well to see how they think and feel and let them be the foundation for the creative and strategy. And I think keeping that open mind and not being afraid to be different is so important. And one other thing that we do, of course, we find trust in great partners. So working with whether it's a local agency or we do have a great agency that we work with in Indiana, and just letting them freely, I would say, share their ideas and their thoughts, even if it goes kind of outside, pushes the envelope and goes outside that typical, what we call clinical marketing strategy. Not being afraid to be different and to stand out is so important.
What sort of internal advocates do you look at, and internal stakeholders do you look at to really push your marketing?
We recently had a rebrand, and it was huge for us to include all the stakeholders. And for us as an academic health center, we have a lot of those. So whether it's our senior leadership, everything from the CMO, CEO, COO to, even our students on the academic side, students, employees, faculty, staff, really to hear everyone's voice and not just those people, making the decisions, but everyone we feel really has a stake. And we like to kind of get a feeling for what everyone's thinking about, the place they come and work.
I know you guys have a limited budget, obviously being an academic health institute. So where do you focus that budget most of all when you're doing your marketing campaigns? What sort of media, what sort of creative do you guys like to really point your money towards to maximize that dollar for dollar?
So when we're talking about maximizing the effectiveness of our budget, I think the most important thing we've done over the past several years is spending a majority of our dollars on non-traditional advertising. So whether that's focusing more on the digital side, that includes your typical search and display ads, but also the social media and paid social media. We've been using a lot of that recently. And a larger portion of our budget, we've been also using CRM for our targeted direct mail campaigns. And then recently we put a lot of dollars into our brand in itself and the site. And like I said, we did have a rebrand, so it was really important for us to build that new brand. And we did a lot of site marketing. So we have a children's hospital and a cancer center. So starting last fiscal year and into this fiscal year, we're really focusing on, connecting the dots with all of our sites and focusing on those big buckets to ensure that our consumers are associating, the largest multi-specialty practice in the region, both primary and specialty care, with us.
When you talk about utilizing social and digital, obviously there's a ton of things on the internet, a ton of things on social, a lot going on. How do you break through that, and how do you get people to pay attention to your advertising or your creative on there versus some of the other, looking at cat pictures or other things that they can do?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would say for us, it's really important to focus on our consumer or potential patient as the hero, and really put the focus on them and not on ourselves. And we're pretty humble. We don't like to boast about ourselves. We're not always talking about awards we've won or the great things we've done. Some people find that important, but it's really important for us more to tell people not just that we are an academic health center, but how that directly relates to them and their families and how it helps us provide better care for our patients.
So how do you judge a campaign to be successful when you're putting out all this stuff, whether it's digital, like you said, whether it's CRM, whether it's direct mail, site advertising? What does a successful campaign look like to you? What metrics do you determine to decide, yes, this worked, no, this didn't work?
Well, for us, we're looking a lot at preference in the market, and we use an NRC consumer survey that we do monthly and quarterly to track our relational management and measurement. And we use ROI tracking for our direct mail campaigns and digital campaigns for more tactical measurement. And we do have a marketing analyst on our team, and she's the one that's monthly, kind of taking a gauge and measurement of where we stand in the market, what we're doing, putting together monthly dashboards with those NRC survey questions to see what the preference is like and how things are going, and really gauging our success and being able to talk about our success to our internal stakeholders is so important for us. But I would say that's most how we track the success of our ads specifically, or campaigns. And on social media, of course, and digital as well, we're tracking it through the amount of clicks and the conversion rate with the click-throughs and things like that. It's a lot easier to track, obviously.
Talking about hospital marketing, obviously, as opposed to marketing a consumer product or some other things, usually when you get someone looking at your products or services, it's not a joyous occasion other than perhaps childbirth or obstetrics or something. But so how do you kind of overcome that in your marketing to kind of look at the fact that when people are looking at using you based on the nature of your product, it's usually not a happy occasion or not something they want to be using? How do you market to that sort of, emotion or mindset and take that into account?
It is really hard. It's very difficult, especially with our cancer center, for instance. And, you do have those times when, you're talking to someone and they're in a very tough situation and it's not a happy case and that they're coming in. Most of the time it's not, and with us being academic health center, we see a lot of, we have a children's hospital as well and cancer. So we see a lot of those folks facing, really hard times, tough decisions. And I think most of the time, especially with our new campaign that we have, we're really empowering our patients to take care of themselves, to take care of their health, and really just partnering with them during this time and making sure that they know, we're here all the way through. We're here for them anytime, whether it's for a well visit or, it's in a very traumatic case. So I think that's really helped us to confront that. And, we do tell a lot of great patient stories, and that's pretty common in healthcare marketing. But I feel like that's a great way to, relate and tell stories of success, but also to have, stories that people can say, this is something that I'm going through, they can relate to, and they feel like they sort of have that support there as well. So telling, good stories that come through of success cases or treatments that worked and things like that, I feel like are a great way to connect with your audience and not just in a negative way.
Sure. Getting back to a point you made before, you said that you guys focus less on traditional marketing and more on digital. If I was having this conversation with you 10, 15 years ago, I doubt that would be the case. So obviously marketing's changed a lot in that time. How do you see things changing in the next 10 to 15 years, and how do you guys plan to kind of deal with some of those new challenges and new abilities in marketing to kind of stay ahead of the curve, and where do you see that going?
So I think I see ourselves in the next 10 to 15 years, we're going to have a very heavy digital presence, which is going to be key to meeting our consumers where they're at. Like you said, we have a lot to compete with in the market from a technological standpoint, but the cat memes and everyone's looking for their healthcare information online. So again, we have to meet people where they're at. People are only going to get busier, and we know that. So there's going to be a lot more messages flooding their way. We really have to put our patients at the center and be convenient in answering their questions and keeping them and their families healthy. And another way that we've been doing this is through content marketing. So we've develop blogs, one for the adult hospital, one for the children's hospital, and really just being a healthcare resource, putting that content out there online. And it's really given our social media legs as well, and doing paid posts and things of that nature. So I find us doing a lot more of that, and meeting that consumer, getting more one-on-one engaging with them, I think is so important.
Things are certainly becoming more individually targeted than you ever could in the past. Well, Emily,
Absolutely.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Up next in the Hospital Marketing Podcast, Scott caught up with Bill Swanston of Frederick Swanston. Let's get his thoughts.
I'm here with Bill Swanston, partner and executive creative director at Frederick Swanston. Bill, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, definitely, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Bill, how do you come up with great creative in your marketing?
Yeah, definitely. With every project that we do here at Frederick Swanston, we start with a creative brief. And it really it is the crux of every campaign that we ever develop. It's always very much based on a strategy. So we believe that the best work comes from a direct collaboration between the people that work, and that's the creatives, and the people that know the brand the best, and that really is the client.
So tell us a little more about the creative brief.
For sure. So a brief should be brief. Far too often people try to dump the whole truckload of information in there. And we do love info. We're background junkies. So give us all your research, give us all your data. We definitely want that information. But when it comes to writing the brief, it should be very, very simple. And if it doesn't, my rule is if it doesn't fit on one page, then I send it back.
Then it's not brief.
Yeah, exactly. It's not brief at all. The creatives really are going to go, they're going to look at the creative brief, and the first thing they're going to do, the creative mind is different from the account executive mind. The first thing they're going to go to is that one single-minded proposition. You know, what is the unique selling point that we're trying to convey in whatever the creative is? It's important for a creative to have a sandbox to play in, and so that they know what are the boundaries of how creative I can be. And so knowing what that key point is that we're trying to make, what is the one thing we want the consumer to take away from the piece of communication we're creating is really fundamental.
So what areas do you use to focus your budget? When you're trying to focus on that one area, how do you focus your budget and kind of getting that across? Or not your budget, the client's budget.
Yeah, and one of the things we always try to tell our clients, because clients sometimes are very reluctant to tell you their budget. They tell you what they're trying to achieve, and then they want you to come back with great ideas. And it's really a challenge, because if a client doesn't share that budget in advance, we can come up with an idea, to throw a guy out of a spaceship, and he's, Red Bulling it down with their logo on the parachute. That's a great idea, get lots of, attention, but it's not within budget. So the other thing we tell clients is don't be afraid to tell us your budget, because we can work within any budget.
Sure.
We've done television campaigns where the production budget was $10,000, and we've done television campaigns where the production budget was more in the mid six figures.
Sure.
So it really, creativity isn't defined by how much money you have. A good idea is a good idea regardless of the budget.
Is there an area of marketing, maybe it's a medium, maybe it's a strategy, that you find to be the most efficient use, so you try to steer clients towards, that you think is the most efficient use of their money in terms of getting success out of a campaign?
In terms of media, I would say right now, and this is definitely, I don't think anybody would disagree with this, the digital space is perhaps, even though you're seeing more and more dollars year over year go towards digital, it's still the most efficient use of dollars right now. You're not going to get the same reach that you're going to get from general media with a television campaign. For sure, it's the quickest way to make an impression, but you can't always afford to run TV, and nothing is more efficient than, and it's not necessarily the most creative use of dollars, but a pay-per-click campaign is pretty darn effective, and dollar for dollar, it's certainly the most efficient.
When you're looking at a campaign and analyzing it, how do you define a successful campaign? Are there certain metrics you use, and which ones would those be to say this campaign worked, this one didn't work as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so depending on the campaign. So let's just say, for example, it's a brand awareness campaign. We're trying to create a distinctive brand positioning for a client. We will try to do and encourage the client to do a baseline study. Research really is only effective if you do it at least twice. So if you'd establish a baseline of here's where we are today, this is what the perceptions are of your brand, this is what people think about your brand, and this is what people think might be motivating for your brand to become, and it would be believable, then you have to go back and see after a certain period of time, okay, that was successful, we've moved the needle. And then it'd be great to keep that going, continue to do research to see how effective it is. So that's for brand. I think for lead generation campaigns, it's a little bit easier because you're setting up metrics that you can easily measure depending on what the goals are. So if you're trying to drive hospital visits, for example, around a certain specialty, well, that's something we can easily measure before and after a campaign starts and finishes.
So the space is obviously getting more and more cluttered, and it gets harder to break through. I know I've talked with other marketers, and they say, well, when I'm advertising, not only am I competing against other hospitals, I'm competing against every sort of medium out there, every sort of product that's advertising for attention. How do you break through that clutter to get people to pay attention to your creative and further act upon that?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's two answers to that. I think the first is the creative itself. It's more important than ever that your creative is compelling, and it's especially in the healthcare space where a lot of it can feel somewhat cookie cutter. Breaking out of that mold and trying to do something that's different for the category but still true to the brand is important. And then the second thing is, even though it is very cluttered, it's a very exciting time to be in advertising in terms of being able to target your audience very specifically. So never before have we had the tools available to us to really drill down to very narrowly define, here are the people we're trying to reach, and here is the media that they consume. And so it's become very, very, I wouldn't say easy, but exciting, and the opportunity definitely is there to be very targeted to your market.
Marketing's obviously changing, and I know you've mentioned the digital space, which obviously 10 years ago was not a big source of marketing. How do you see marketing changing over the next decade, and what do you think your hospital campaigns may look like in, say, 2025, 2030?
Yeah, I think it's going to. I think we're on the fast track for evolution in the hospital market because consumers have more and more and more choice in the space. And so, back in the day when hospitals may not have been as aggressive in the marketing space, they will year over year, and we'll see that, I think, steadily increase.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? We lost you. We lost you for a second. Could you just repeat what you just said?
Sure. From the beginning?
I got to 10 years was the last thing I heard.
Okay. Shoot, I forgot what I was saying. Anyway, so I think what I was saying is that I think what you're going to see over the next 10 years is that hospitals more and more will be focused on what the consumer is looking for.
Sure.
And a patient won't be thought of as so much as a patient anymore. They really will be seen as a consumer. And so hospitals will continue to play the role of a consumer brand more and more, less so much as a service-oriented industry. We're gonna become more like a Procter and Gamble in terms of our approach to marketing. So the creative itself has to be different and challenging to the consumer's mindset as to how they think about hospitals. But then the opportunity for the hospital itself to think more like a packaged goods company is going to become, I think, prevalent within the next 10 years.
So do you think marketing will get a little more creative in that standpoint because you're looking at it more like a product like that rather than a health service?
Absolutely. I think that the creative for hospitals will have to become more creative. And honestly, it's going to take some brave hospitals to do some exciting campaigns that are more engaging and aren't quite so cookie cutter for it to then take off. Because I think what will happen is when that hospital takes that brave step and the creative comes out and it is heavily recognized as a very compelling campaign, then other hospitals will say, okay, that worked for them. It's been proven. I'm gonna try that now.
I love how great creative leads to copycats. Other people want to be as creative as the other.
It's not as scary, right? When another client is willing to take a chance and they don't get skewered by consumers, and just the opposite happens, and people become brand advocates. Yeah, it becomes intoxicating for other advertisers.
I just love the idea of saying I want to be creative and original, just like all those other people doing this.
Exactly. Every day. Can we do something like Apple? Yeah. Okay.
Hey.
Lastly, I had a chance to personally speak with Chris Lee of DMD Connects Healthcare. Chris, I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to join us. Do you mind just giving us a little bit of background on DMD and what you guys do?
I sure do. DMD is probably one of the oldest companies you've never heard of. We have a 100-year history, and what we've done in that course of time, or that amount of time, is shifted from DMD was one of the original companies for direct marketing, and then that evolved, over the last 100 years into, if you remember, magazines, and they used to have labels that you would affix to the magazine. We were actually the ones that produced those. And then over the last decade, we've really evolved to be a 100% digital focused. So we've gotten out of our print capabilities, and now we're 100% digitally focused on the physician and provider community. So we've got the nation's largest database of provider email, which include physicians, nurses, pharmacists, any clinical provider. We've got a database of their contact information, and distinguish ourselves from our competitors by being the only ones that have 100% opted in, meaning all the providers have agreed to participate.
Oh, great.
And it's fully authenticated.
Great. So basically you're helping the consumer find the best possible provider for themselves, correct?
A little different. So we focus on end users, which for us primarily are large pharmaceutical companies,
Okay.
hospitals, medical device entities. And what they are trying to do and how we help them is to tighten and enhance their relationship with the physician community.
Okay.
So, for example, pharmaceutical companies are seeking to supplement the efforts of their reps getting into the offices. It's harder and harder to do that, just like with the hospitals and the liaison.
Okay.
Harder and harder to get time with doctors, and we can help supplement that.
Okay. Okay. Well, speaking on the hospital side of things, do you mind just sharing an example of a time where hospitals used DMD to improve their marketing and to really drive some ROI there, and how were you able to track and define that success?
It's a very good question. So hospitals, the same approach that they're taking to the consumer market, we argue works with their provider market, which is using any kind of communications, in this case digital communications, to enhance your brand, to growth, obviously, and I'll walk you through an example there, engagement, and then obviously the end stage is that is loyalty. So if you think of the consumer path through that, being aware of your brand, utilizing your brand, and then enhancing that relationship, it's the same thing with your provider community. They need to know what your brand stands for, what the capabilities of your system, the clinical capabilities of the system. Then the provider you develop that relationship with them, and then over time, through repeated communication, you're enhancing that relationship and thus gaining their loyalty. So how does that work? I'll use a couple of examples with, for example, academic medical centers.
Okay.
One of the things that we help a lot of academic medical centers with is alumni outreach. So because we're a database licensee of the AMA, and we have our own database, we're actually a better source of alumni information than most of the academic medical centers.
Oh, wow.
Because that's what we focus on. So we can help them as they're reaching out to their alumni who have dispersed across the country, and let them know what are developments that are happening at the center, clinical innovations, new deans that are coming on board, et cetera. And how that really helps the academics is alumni tend to be their largest donors for foundations, and it gives them that bragging rights across the country wherever their alumni have gone, as well as on the U.S. News and World Report. Speaking of, that's another area that we help hospitals as they are showcasing their clinical capabilities. U.S. News is one of the leading barometers of their success, and we can help communicate that message. So when you do land as one of the better hospitals in your region, or perhaps even in the country, or in a specialty, you can broadcast that message not only to the consumer side, which is always important, but also to the physician, because they're the ones that are going to be channeling their patients that have those needs to your facility.
Right.
And the best way that you can track measurement of the success of these campaigns, which is the part that I love relative to any other form of communication. So relative to mass media, relative to direct mail, or even knocking on doors, is digital communications can be tracked. So you know exactly which message was opened, meaning it was read, how long it was read, which ones were simply discarded, which physicians said they do not want to receive communications from you. You can have call to action in the communication. And this is how providers actually want to receive information. They receive it on their laptop, desktop, tablet.
Right.
They can look at it whenever they want to. They can look at it multiple times, and we can tell you that. And then that call to action, if they want additional information, you simply embed links in there, and they can immediately go to your landing page. And as a marketer, you're controlling that conversation. And because you can measure it digitally, you can do A/B testing on just about everything. So you can, meaning you send out a tagline and track the yield on it. If it opens better than another one, if A is better than B, then the rest of your communications go with A, and you can do that physically and change all the time. So digital communications are so easy, so effective, and the ROI on email is practically untouched in the communications industry.
It's, it goes to show, the shift from traditional media to digital, is definitely a real thing. And it sounds like DMD is definitely, one of the leaders in that field in terms of hospital marketing and helping, consumers find the right physicians and whatnot. Correct?
That's exactly it. What we think of is multiple means of communication. It's how marketers think. You've got mass media, direct mail, social. You've got all of these tools that are at your disposal, and this is one that we've seen in the consumer world. If you go to Amazon or Zappos or anything like that, and it's just beginning to be recognized how the power of digital communications with consumers and providers. I think it's still in its infancy with hospitals as they improve their marketing and get more and more savvy. I think they'll leapfrog some of the other industries because they will adopt. It may have been laggards in adopting, but they will be moving faster through the continuum because they can learn from what big pharma and consumer package companies have been doing for a long time.
Right. Great. Well, that's all great stuff, and definitely goes to show how the landscape of hospital marketing in general is shifting towards a more digital landscape, it sounds like. Once again, Chris Lee, DMD, Chief Commercial Officer, I really appreciate you joining us here on the first episode of our hospital marketing podcast. Chris, was it dmdconnects.com you said?
Yes, dmdconnects.com, and I appreciate the time. This has been fun.
Well, that wraps up this edition of the Hospital Marketing Podcast. I'd like to thank Emily, Bill, and Christopher for their thoughts and their time. We'd love your input on great hospital marketing as well. Please email me to participate in our show with your thoughts at patrick@dtcperspectives.com. And don't forget about our great event, the Hospital Marketing National Conference, taking place in Atlanta in early June 2018, where we have great speakers like these presenting their approaches to marketing, what works and what doesn't, case studies, marketing research, plus awards for some of the best hospital marketing campaigns and hospital marketers. You can get more info on that at www.hmnconference.com. For all of us at DTC Perspectives, thanks for listening to the Hospital Marketing National Podcast.